expected. Therefore, he decides to relax and blame everything on the shoulders of the gentleman, falling into the dice. There are still very strong people here, so you should expect spectacles. Scary creatures of the underworld are approaching from different sides. This does not go unnoticed by Kingshan, but Heavenly Dao calms the girl, promising her safety. The man snaps his fingers, and outside the shield there is an exact copy of the Heavenly Dao guard, who, according to the hero, is exactly able to do his job. Kingshan wonders why the master didn't let her go to stop the creatures, but created a copy. He smiles, referring to his own goals. If the Heavenly Dao allows Kingshan to enter the fray, the world will be destroyed even before he regains reincarnation. Meanwhile, the Dao clone offers the underground creatures a deal. They all calmly return back. But if not and they continue the offensive, then he will destroy them all. Some creatures thought about it, and someone thought it was a bluff and decided to test the powers of the Heavenly Dao clone. The rules of the underworld say everyone can get on the soup. The evil spirits believe that they have more chances for the ass because there are more of them, so they actively began to attack. The dark clone of the Heavenly Dao notes the greed of people, because of which the first and second cycles expected the same deplorable outcome. A creature swoops down on him, but he doesn't even back down, just decides to have fun with them. The underground creatures miss with each blow, having never hit the clone yet, from which he grins and begins to doubt at least some of the abilities of these creatures. Suddenly, Owls appears, possessing the early rank of the Order of Heaven. During the second great cycle, in order to protect his master, he tried to restore his consciousness. After death, he relied on powerful magical power. He is dressed in a purple cloak and holds a bright magic ball in his hands. Owls attracts the attention of a clone who launches a powerful gravitational strike, but this kind of magic is not able to stop the clone of the Heavenly Dao. In an instant, a slot of the middle rank of the Order of Heaven swoops in. The first known killer of the Rat clan, with super fast speed and unsurpassed killing skills, was killed while attempting to attack the elf god. He shouts that this attack is only to delay the clone, and he flies to the blue shield, which contains Kingshan and Heavenly Dao. Kingshan notifies that someone has attacked them, but Heavenly Dao calms the girl, asking her not to worry and not to look. Meanwhile, the clone quickly approaches the rat and grabs it by the head. The killer does not expect such a turn of events and is rapidly flying back to Earth, where the enemy has just been. Owls looks in fear at the dark clone, who crossed his arms over his chest and warned that one should not go too far with games. But someone from the crowd of underground creatures puts forward the idea of attacking all together. Then there are more chances. Everything will work out for sure. But they won't succeed. In the same position as before, he expects an attack by creatures that decided to swoop in from all sides. The clone decides to show them absolute strength. His eye lit up brightly with a blue light, and he stretched out his hand with a fist. The monsters stopped and looked at the Heavenly Dao clone in fear. He stretched out his index finger and ordered everyone to kneel, and they immediately fell to the ground, assuming the indicated position. A couple of non-attacking creatures remained in the air. They were clearly shocked by the clone's similar strength, because he was able to put a huge number of underground monsters in just a couple. Loud laughter began to be heard from the darkness, and a skeleton knight, Wanhai, who very much wanted to try out such a force on himself, rode out. All the creatures began to shout over the name of this knight. They say that in the first cycle he was the most powerful knight, and even after death he did not exhaust his strength. And currently he is one of the most powerful beings in the world. Banhai declares that all the treasures of the world should belong to him, and those who will get in his way should not take their heads off. The knight shoots at the clone, to which he only calmly, smiling, confirms the first one's blunder. The knight smiles maliciously, and it doesn't mean anything good. He sends a red whirlwind of power that sweeps away many creatures, and those two creatures in the air are again struck by someone else's power. With all his might, Vahai flies at the clone, but he did not even move from his place, expecting an attack. Arriving, the knight receives a strong punch in the face, from which he is surprised. Blue energy sweeps away everything in its path, including the knight, who is not only amazed, but also does not understand how this is possible, because he has never lost to anyone. The question about the great power was asked by three underground creatures. The totem of the eastern land is Hawa, the ancestor of the corpse sect from the second cycle is Gulao, and the founder of the necromancer sect is Daisy. The clone smiles at their question and realizes that not everyone has escaped yet, so he offers to fight with himself. The creatures sweat on their faces. They begin to refuse, saying that they have no right to fight with him. Their goal is just to find out the name of His Excellency and the purpose of his visit. After learning about this, the clone told me not to ask, but just to wait. The remaining creatures calmly agree with this. Suddenly, a bright light emanating from the shield of the Heavenly Dao illuminates the space. The three remaining creatures, Hova, Gulao and Daisy, are delighted with the beautiful light from above, which they thought they would never reach. They also admired the power of the Heavenly Dao that could restore reincarnation. All the undead, who fell under the radiation of light, began to regain flesh and blood. They become people. Purple flames emanated from their bodies. Many rejoiced at finding their former appearance. Heavenly Dao confidently says that they have finished, and Kingshan looks at the master's creation in delight. Instead of black, the ball with energy acquired delicate blue, purple and red colors. All this was done for the normal functioning of the borders. Someone starts to giggle and claim that the work is worthy of the Heavenly Dao. A girl with a small fang speaks about the ease with which the hero was able to restore reincarnation. The demon lady would like to thank the Heavenly Dao for the work done. Having found a human shell, people rejoice, not believing in what is happening. Souls are being perfected, but no one can make up for broken souls except Heavenly Dao. In the air behind the three remaining creatures of the underworld, a Heavenly Dao with Kingshan appears. They all turn around abruptly and are a little startled to be interested in the truth of his position. Kingshan is annoyed and tries to attack the ignorant who dared to treat the gentleman so rudely, but he immediately calms her down. Heavenly Dao with a smile on his face confirms the assumption of beings and who he is. In disbelief, Daisy pinches Gulao to check whether it's a dream or reality. Fortunately or unfortunately, Gulao was in pain, which means, indeed, this is not a dream. Hova is trembling all over, as she has not yet moved away from the disaster of the second cycle and does not particularly feel the desire to repeat such a thing. A gentleman approaches her to ask about what happened and how many escaped the disaster. Tao looks at Hova searchingly, but she is no longer worried and calmly answers. It turns out that there are enough resources in the secret world, so you can survive the disaster. Tao now realizes how many managed to survive, but he decides to ask about their powers, whether they are able to resist the Heavenly Dao. And he gets his answer. Despite the fact that the underworld is quite sparse, there are more than 100 heavenly forces in it. All of them work together to resist the heavens, but in the end only a dozen supporters survived. Hova dares to ask the man why he arranged this disaster, to which he is slightly worried and talks to the sphere. Tao understands that if he says about his overestimation, they do not check and decides to scare changes in the laws of the underworld. Since the underworld is somehow the pinnacle of existence, it is inevitable that changes in the laws will affect it. But not everyone has the law. Only a limited number of people, creatures see what others have without it, so they start fighting. The Heavenly Dao evenly distributed opportunities between people, but, unfortunately, there are exceptions when the balance of power gradually broke, as it was with the Night Wahai. For example, the broken reincarnation of the underworld. The thing is that the head of the Huangshan Yuan Xuan clan and the demon lady began to fight with each other, and in the end, reincarnation was broken. Since then, reincarnation has lost its power, which led to similar consequences. Thus, the Heavenly Dao wants to save the lives of more people, otherwise this world will come to an end. Daisy remembers that in the past they were obsessed with cultivation only, so they didn't pay attention to others. For them, it became a kind of retribution. The Heavenly Dao leads to the idea that regardless of a person's strength, he, in any case, will make a mistake one day, so it is very important to correct it in time, and invites these three underground beings to join themselves. They all look shocked at the man who said all this, and Kingshan reminds him that they are not strong enough and unworthy of his attention. He is convinced of the opposite and believes that their forces are necessary to maintain order, despite the fact that they are powerless against him. But they are among the most powerful in their world. Kingshan just looks at the gentleman with displeasure, but does not say anything. Reincarnation is not perfect. It has a mechanism of natural absorption of souls, so weak souls are more susceptible to absorption. But for beings superior to gods and kings, the power of reincarnation is not so important. This is where the forces of Gulao, Daisy and Hao will come in handy. They will become messengers of the devil in the organization Afterlife when danger arises. Their task is to transfer the soul of the opponent to the sphere of reincarnation. Heavenly Dao once again asks the creatures if they would like to join the afterlife, while Kingshan behind praises the name invented by the master. Gulao and Daisy stand in a frenzy, not understanding what they should do now. Kingshan closed her eyes and smiled sweetly, showing with all her appearance that they have no right to refuse, otherwise they will be punished in the form of herself. Daisy and Gulao wave their heads together, immediately agreeing, but Hova decides to put forward one condition. From this, Kingshan goes into a rage, not understanding how some totem from the eastern land dares to set conditions, and Tao with his mouth open just looks at the girl in surprise, waiting for her further speech. The man decides to assume the condition and turns out to be right. Hova asks for her wound to be cured. Kingshan angrily looks at everything that is happening, but there is nothing he can do about it. Hova turns around and shows the wound on her back that the demonic wolf Teku left her, and the juice of the tree of life from the forest of elves is needed to heal her. Heavenly Dao thinks about it and realizes that they will have to go to the forests of the elves. The man agrees to the totem condition. Hova happily thanks him in front of her eyes. There is only one question left to solve. Who will become the manager? Here Kingshan gets involved again with his proposal. She suggests Yu Mingshan, believing that she would be the best fit. The gentleman punches it through his system. Yu Mingshan has the reverse heaven rank. She is chained in ice. First, the girl defied the heavens, and then accepted defeat from the sword of the demonic lord of ice. Heavenly Dao wonders if he will be able to resurrect her, and the sphere confirms that his strength is enough for this. At the same moment, they set off to resurrect Yu Mingshan, leaving the underground creatures floating in the air in shock. With great speed, the heroes flew to meet their goal, and then Kingshan decides to ask the gentleman a question. She understood perfectly well that the Dao could heal Hao's wound without visiting the forest of elves, and this really worried her. The gentleman smiles and began to tell her something about completing a mission from a non-player character, so it's supposedly more interesting. But Kingshan still did not understand anything. The question remained in question. Soon the heroes arrived and descended to Earth. A girl, chained in chains, appeared to the eye. This was Yu Mingshan. Tao brings his hand to the girl's face, making sure of her death. Even though she was killed and sealed, her aura is just like that of a living one. It turns out that among the 5 incarnations of heaven, Kingshan's strength is the weakest. But fortunately, the girl did not hear this, as she was standing far away. In order not to waste time, the Heavenly Dao decides to proceed with the resurrection of Yu Mingshan. An alert comes from the Dao system. A reminder, the resurrection of the incarnations of heaven takes away a considerable amount of power from the Heavenly Dao and cannot be returned to the Master again. After the notification, the system again clarifies the desire of the Master in the resurrection of Yu Mingshan. He thinks for a couple of moments and decides to just be careful, transferring 1% of his power to the heavenly incarnation, because this power will not return to him anymore. There are strong bursts of energy in blue all around again. Kingshan is trying to stand on her feet, because even she is torn down by such force. A huge area was illuminated by this strong bluish light, which even reached the underworld and almost demolished Gulao, Daisy, and Hova. They didn't understand why the Heavenly Dao would release so much of its energy, because it could erase boundaries. A huge wave of energy passes through the entire underground world, affecting literally every creature. The Heavenly Dao clutches this 1% of its power in its hands and is called by Kingshan, to which he only justifies himself, since when he released the power, he forgot to direct it in the right direction. The power of the Heavenly Dao is indeed terrifying, but at the same time amazing. A man approaches a dead girl and puts his power into her. From this, all the shackles fall off in an instant, and Yu Mingshan opens his eyes. The girl runs into the gentleman, hugging and rejoicing at his return. Immediately they are separated by Kingshan, dissatisfied with what is happening. Yu Mingshan apologizes, blaming everything on his emotions. The Heavenly Dao rises from the ground, and the girl bows to him and thanks him for the resurrection. So, starting today, Yu Mingshan becomes the managing organization of the afterlife, and its task is to build the afterlife and ensure the safety of reincarnation. For the girl, this task becomes the whole meaning of her existence, and the sphere again finds fault with the formulation of the Heavenly Dao, to which he dismisses her. It immediately becomes noticeable that the character of both girls is different, but if the gentleman lets another one near him, he will go crazy. Kingshan pouted her lips, turned away for a long time and did not look at them. But Yu Mingshan decides to ask if the master will stay in the underworld, but is refused since there are plenty of other things and worries. Heavenly Dao calms the heavenly incarnation, telling him to behave more confidently. Besides, he has already restored reincarnation in the underworld. Yu Mingshan only needs to become the mistress of the underworld. The girl understood everything. Tao is smiling and only one Kingshan is dissatisfied again. Suddenly, a message from Yu Mingshan arrives for all the inhabitants of the underworld. Listen carefully, all those who now live in the underworld. I am one of the incarnations of heaven, Yu Mingxian. From now on I will manage the underworld, as well as help the Heavenly Dao in managing the entire earth. Now you will work for the benefit of the Heavenly Dao, and the above-mentioned beings will be responsible for the construction work. Powerful beings will become messengers of the devil, will go for souls to lead them to reincarnation, and just try to disobey. You will immediately become an enemy of the Heavenly Dao. Many listened, being in shock, and someone was immediately dissatisfied with the turn of these events. Heavenly Dao noted her extraordinary abilities in management, and then learned from the sphere that she used to be the mistress of the clan. The man is convinced that there will be no problems if he leaves the afterlife in the hands of Yu Mingxian. Clasping her hands and drawing her eyebrows together, a disgruntled Kingshan looked at the girl standing on the cliff of the mountain. But he immediately calms down and asks the gentleman where their path now lies. As a result, the heroes head to the Forest of Elves. The Forest of Elves is a rather more welcoming, bright and beautiful place, unlike the underworld. Here the heroes meet dense green vegetation, which cannot but rejoice. Prison carts full of elves are moving again. Once again, merchants are trying to cash in on living creatures, trying to sell them as dearly as possible. Beautiful elves sit sadly in dungeons and can't do anything. But suddenly someone appears from the bushes. This is none other than the commander of the group of abductors from the Earth Dragon, a knight of the 3rd rank, Sabai. He is holding a sharpened sword in his hands, and he is sitting astride a huge green dragon that does not look friendly. With him, people are not afraid of anyone who could stop them. A dark silhouette of Sabai appears out of nowhere, hostile to human hunters because of the rule of the Heavenly Dao. The elf kidnappers, in obvious shock, with their mouths open and without the slightest understanding of what is happening, take out their swords, again not realizing that it is useless. The silhouette points a finger at people, and Sabai regards this gesture as a desire to capture their prey. The clone pulls out a sword, which makes the hunters laugh, but the first one is clearly not joking. He draws some kind of symbol on the ground, which causes a dragon of the 5th rank, which makes Sabai very surprised and even scared. Seeing the shadow of the knight on the dragon approaching, the elves began to rejoice at the approaching salvation. Only they thought it was the elf lord who heard their pleas, except for one girl sitting furthest away. It was she who was confused by the dark silhouette of the savior, because if it was the elf king, he would have sent a white elf angel. Meanwhile, Sabai was still trying to talk to him, assuring him of his fearlessness in front of the dark silhouette. But he just looked at the man without emotion and crossed 2 fingers, and then angrily squeezed his hand, saying that he needed everyone. In a rage, Sabai shouts at the shadow, dissatisfied with the fact that he spent so much effort on catching all his prey. And then some knight of the 5th rank appears and tries to take all the elves from him. The man shouts that this silhouette is just a fake, since his dragon was not afraid of him. Then they, hunters, should not be afraid. They all ran to attack the Dark Knight. A blue flame bursts out of the dragon's mouth and it goes straight at the hunters. Everyone who got under the action of the flame immediately falls dead. Sabai notices this, being in great confusion, watching how his hunter warriors were defeated too quickly and easily by one Dark Knight. When everyone was down, the silhouette went to Sabai on the dragon, and he just plaintively prayed that they would not approach him. But the dark silhouette followed other goals, and he had just freed these other goals from the wooden bars by cutting them with a huge sword. The elves began to thank their savior, as at that time Sabai decided to take advantage of the moment while the doppelganger turned his back on him. Apparently, imagining himself the strongest and most powerful, he tried to stab in the back, but it was not there. The elf tried to warn about the attack, but it was not necessary. Throwing the sword, without even turning around, the dark silhouette hits the target directly and kills his weak opponent who dared to attack in the back. The leader died, and when everyone found out about it, they immediately ran in different directions, shouting to everyone to escape from the monster. Suddenly, one of the escapees gets an arrow right in the forehead, and this he received a gift from the 3rd squad of the Legion of Guardians, who arrived to help his fellow refugees. An elf with a bow and a guy standing next to her noticed a Dark Knight who saved their comrades and defeated all the kidnappers. At this time, another elf grabs the hunter and threatens to sell him to the nobles, for which an arrow flies to his head from his own silhouette at the same moment. Noticing this, the elves began to prepare for battle, preparing bows, but the newly rescued elf covers the silhouette, trying to prevent a battle. Everyone is looking at her without understanding such actions and waiting for an explanation. According to her explanations, it was clear that this silhouette had done nothing wrong, as it brings justice to the world. Apparently, the main elf did not quite understand the essence of the girl's thoughts, so she asked what it all meant. The silhouette of an elf unties the hands of the chained elves, and meanwhile the leader of the elves and the girl who defended this silhouette are talking. It explains the essence of their existence. Silhouettes have one feature: they attack only those who intend to sell another person. This is true for both kidnappers and keepers. Therefore, until he feels the intention of selling, he will not attack. The main elf understands what the matter is and orders not to take anyone with her. The girls exchange glances and look at the silhouette, which successfully disappears into thin air. And the rescued elf thanks this mysterious stranger who saved her life. The narrative is transferred to our main characters. Suddenly, the Heavenly Dao sneezes. From this, Kingshan begins to worry, wondering about his health. He blames everything on the fact that something got into his nose and continues to fly on. Here they fly over the site of a recent clash of silhouettes and merchants. Kingshan notices that something has happened down there, and Tao just smiles, realizing that these are the actions of the law he previously adopted. Heavenly Dao looks around and smiles, noticing the arrival of several green lights that hit the ground and turn into messengers of the devil. The elves look at what is happening in surprise, and souls fly out of the merchants, who are immediately chained by the newly arrived messengers of the devil. They tied the souls on a leash and pulled them into the afterlife. All this action did not take long. The elf looked at it all in surprise until the leader called her to go back to Kale. The girl agrees and understands that only she saw what was happening to the souls of the merchants just now. But the transition to the afterlife is working successfully. Heavenly Dao looks at this, and Kingshan praises his success in business. He smiles, but asks not to change the subject and not to forget the purpose of their visit here. After all, their next destination is the capital of the elves, the city of life, Kale. Kale is a beautiful sunny city. All the rescued refugees were brought here and now its rules are explained to them. From now on, all those rescued will be responsible for the cleanliness of the city, since elves do not raise lazy people. They shouted loudly in agreement with the rules of the city. The elf was handed a broom. She looked at the tall, powerful tree and realized with joy that she had finally returned home. While she was sweeping, a cart passed by her with some important beings who had stopped by the city. The carriage stops and Heavenly Dao and Kingshan get out of it. The first one notes a huge number of elves, so he asks the girl to show her ears to blend in with the crowd. While the heroes were standing, an interesting dialogue between a noble elf and his maid was heard behind them, in which the first one asks about the lower races and how many minerals they have extracted for today. These people passed by without giving a single poor man a coin. Heavenly Dao, although he had nothing against the aristocracy, but the gap between the rich and poor strata of the population oppressed him. Kingshan looks around the area, and the sphere again tries to remind the master that he can wipe out the entire aristocracy from the face of the earth in an instant if he wants. Heavenly Dao again waves away the pesky sphere and rolls his eyes. To achieve equality, the deprived must fight themselves, since the intervention of third parties will only turn them from victims into regular criminals. For clever thoughts and inflexibility of solving problems by force, the sphere praises the Heavenly Dao, for which he only smiles, considering praise as a compliment. Unexpectedly, the gentleman is interested in the world tree, whose condition is directly related to the elven god. When Kingshan found out that the master wanted to find the elven god, he immediately offered to burn the tree so that the girl would immediately show up. Heavenly Dao stops the overly active Kingshan and explains to her that he just wants to talk, not fight. The girl gets a light blow to the forehead with her finger, but this is enough to calm down a little. Kingshan says that the elven goddess was a rebel in the second cycle, and therefore there is nothing to talk about with her. Heavenly Dao listens to the hysterical Kingshan and declares that it is even more important to talk to her, because he wants to understand what the rebels are thinking. Kingshan holds onto his bruised forehead and listens to the master. He, in turn, utters wise thoughts, coming to the conclusion that those who have few enemies, who have many friends, and therefore they should acquire as many allies as possible. Kingshan only agrees with his master's wisdom. Suddenly, everyone starts running to the sides, and someone from afar shouts to get out of the way. This is the perspicacious elven princess Yusha, who is in the middle of the third rank, rushing on her dragon. Yusha flies straight at Tao, who was standing, not going to move to the side. The girl warned more than once and who wanted to, he ran away. The princess drives up to the gentleman and immediately passes through him, as if the man was not there. Heavenly Dao finds out who this girl from the sphere was and decides that later it will be necessary to deal with the upbringing of the children of the nobility, because she behaves impermissibly. Suddenly, a light crown with a bright green glow in the hair runs by very quickly. The girl runs to her grandfather, who does not hear the approach of the crazy princess. She grabs him and pulls him aside for protection, and Yusha only shouts that any rabble get out of her way because she warned. The elf is interested in the condition of the grandfather, to which he calmly thanks the savior. The girl does not understand how elves can be like that. Suddenly there are claps. This Heavenly Dao applauds the elf and praises her for how kind she is for feudal society. The girl turns around and asks who this man is. He appears to be an ordinary passerby and asks his grandfather how rude the elf princess is. It turns out that all the nobility is like that. The fate of the elves was predetermined from birth. Golden and moon elves are members of the royal family. Sea and forest elves are artisans. Gray and black, like this grandfather, can only be slaves. The girl is dissatisfied with the unfairness of what is happening. Believing that everything should not be like this, it is impossible to determine the fate of a person by his birth. She didn't understand why Grandpa was saying that. And these are just conclusions due to life expectancy. Gray elves live only 1,000 years, but golden elves more than 5,000 years. The price of their high life expectancy is low fertility. Therefore, the gods have long determined their fate and they can only obey. Heavenly Dao learns that the stronger the being, the lower the chances of having offspring, so he is interested in his ability to have a child. As a result, it turns out that everything depends on whether he wants to have a child himself or for someone else to have one. While Dao was defending himself from Kingshan, Grandpa said goodbye to the girl who saved his life and set off on his way. The elf understands that this should not happen. All this injustice, and at this moment the Heavenly Dao approaches her and remembers her years of rule, because then the elves were different. The girl froze in shock. She has just been named Lulusha, the former mother and goddess of the elves. She is the rebel who went against heaven. Suddenly, a green light illuminated the space and Lulusha immediately asked who this gentleman was. He only grinned, hinting that he was the same Heavenly Dao. The goddess did not believe him. Then the Lord decided to explain otherwise. He snapped his fingers, which formed a huge blue shield that does not allow magic to be used inside him. This is what Lulusha felt when she tried to use her powers. Heavenly Dao approaches the girl and grabs her chin. He looks into her eyes and asks if she believes him now. Heavenly Dao moved to Lulusha too quickly that she didn't even realize when he did it. The girl pulled away from the man, abruptly throwing her hand off her face. She decided to act. Immediately gathers all his strength into a fist and directs a blow at the master, but it was not there. Kingshan appears, who hits the elf goddess with all the swing of her leg, that she flies away a few meters. The incarnation of heaven is in anger. It does not understand how Lulusha can behave like this with a master. Since the goddess's soul has just begun to recover, and her strength is now barely reaching the top of the 5th rank, she needs to be saved. The girl forms a staff in her hands, and there are magic symbols on the ground to invoke the movement spell. And it seems that everything worked out for her. She moved. However, Lulusha collided with the Heavenly Dao. It is sealed into a powerful shield built by the master, so the move spell did not work. From a strong shock wave, the girl falls to the ground, which forms a small hole. She can't believe her teleportation ability doesn't work here. Lulusha does not have time to relax, as Kingshan jumps up to her, who immediately grabs her and ties her hands behind her back. Heavenly Dao approaches, smiles and asks the defender to let the rebel go. Even the words about who Lulusha is do not stop Kingshan from following the master's orders. She dismisses the goddess with displeasure, and the man asks the latter if she believes in his status as a Heavenly Dao. Lulusha thinks, glancing at the guy, and he grabs her by the shoulder and convinces her that he just wants to ask a couple of questions and nothing more. The goddess looks contemptuously at the hand on her shoulder and realizes that in this situation, even Dongfeng Hayashin would not be able to escape, so she can only cooperate. Lulusha agrees to the questions, and for this correct choice, the Heavenly Dao praises the goddess. Kingshan is still dissatisfied with what is happening. The first question of the gentleman was to find out what the plan of the rebels consists of, to which the goddess refuses and does not answer, as she allegedly does not know their plan herself, even if she is a member of the rebels of the 2nd cycle, but does not know if they have a plan against heaven in the 3rd calendar. From the answer of the goddess, Kingshan is in anger and is going to bite her, but the Heavenly Dao stops the aggressive person and asks to be honest. As a result, it turns out that Lulusha, indeed, may not know anything, since the elven gods are considered to have average strength, so it's normal that she doesn't know anything. Kingshan calmed down and pondered over her master's words. The second question of the Heavenly Dao was to find out the reason for the elf goddess's hatred of heaven. The girl grins at what she has heard, because the answer seems to her the simplest and most banal. In the 1st cycle, she was a goddess born with a world tree. Together with the world tree, they protect the birth and growth of elves. Prosperity and happiness still lives in the memory of the goddess. But at the end of the first cycle, she saw the catastrophe with her own eyes. Lulusha barely survived. She had one breath left, and the peaceful tree turned back into a seed. She angrily darted a glance at the guy and once again asked the question asked to her, which, in her opinion, made no sense. In his defense, Heavenly Dao recalled that it was the fault of the past Dao, and it was his destruction that led to the incitement of this hatred. The hero asked the last question to find out about the most important thing in the heart of the goddess. She looked askance with her own and green eyes at the guy, asked again, and then thought for a while. Lulusha just wanted to live and protect her people forever. She pronounced her main task of life with her hand on her heart, which indicates the sincerity of her intentions. Heavenly Dao calls her a protector, grins and asks about the goddess's capabilities. Kingshan continues to nag her with his angry gaze. From the impudent question of Mr. Lulusha, she flares up sharply and begins to get angry, not understanding in what sense he is talking to her. And he only relies on facts that speak for themselves. The man snaps his fingers and asks to face the truth. They are instantly transported to the elven forest mine. Dark, frightening space meets the eyes of the heroes. In the distance, slaves work in the form of thin shadows. The goddess of the elves covers her nose from an unpleasant smell and wonders where they are. Heavenly Dao reports that this place is called a good job for earning money. Lulusha is indignant when she sees her kinsman being slapped on the back for being slow. Slaves are threatened with corporal punishment if they do not hurry and are late with delivery. The goddess's eyes begin to burn with green flames in anger. She does not understand how the elves dare to treat their own people like that. Heavenly Dao cannot believe that. It turns out, he can only stop the slave trade, and since this is slavery, the dark silhouette will not appear, and accidentally utters all his thoughts aloud. After hearing the man's words and asking about the dark silhouette, Lulusha realizes that those saviors are silhouettes the work of the Heavenly Dao. She is at a loss, because she does not understand when he became so kind. Since the goal is to save slaves, the goddess has a quite logical question why this force should not be applied to pure slavery. Heavenly Dao exhales and says that the goddess has misunderstood something, so he begins to explain everything to her. Since slaves appear only because of the slave trade, but criminals and prisoners are also slaves. In order not to save the latter, exactly such a rule as theirs was invented. It prevents the appearance of slaves. Enraged, Lulusha decides to speak out and name the thing she hates most in the slave trade: murder, harassment, oppression. And all this was decided by the leader of the Heavenly Dao race. The mother goddess of the elves lowers her head below, and her fists are clenched to horror. Suddenly, the guy again attracts the attention of the goddess, grabbing her chin and telling her not to shift all the responsibility to him. Lulusha does not understand why. Having such great power to change everything and save a huge number of people, the Heavenly Dao does not do this. He asks the goddess to think about what she did when the Heavenly Dao wanted to change everything. But at that time the underground kingdom was devastated. Why is heaven the world with the most resources? And why was reincarnation disrupted? The goddess shrinks and screams that they just wanted to live normally, so they tried to take away the power of heaven. All the elves, even the nobility, were just looking for a better life, oppressing their own kind. Confused, Lulusha shouts that what the master said is not true, and the whole point is that he wants to take away the power of all beings to become stronger, so they must resist, otherwise the Heavenly Dao will simply kill them all. The hero grins at what the goddess says, because the power of the Heavenly Dao comes from all beings, so the death of all beings weakens the power of the Heavenly Dao. Therefore, the speech of Lulusha does not make sense. She looks up at the man in confusion, who continues to ask a lot of questions, while tormenting the girl. Which is why she gives up and just grabs her head, because she does not know the answers to the questions. The mother goddess of the elves does not know. Heavenly Dao understands this, but also understands that she wants to know the answers to all the questions asked, so she smiles and shows her a sphere in the form of the earth. The skeleton of a dead man is reflected in the eyes of the goddess.